Anniversary of Human Peacekeepers Day. The first peacekeeping mission was established in Palestine in 1948, known as the Human Peacekeeping Organization. In 1950, its first the 60th foreign bank was it provided the yes, to my data should be stop. See the so people. Like you just Indian intelligence groups and their courage and determination led to the reintegration of after the GS scenario, the town is lying and operations and was supported by the Department of East requires gathering in the band. That's the gathering products. The biggest scheme but leaders of disappeared between 53 and 72 installations as contributed by over 275,000 troops. As one of the largest contributors, our country has deployed contingents and military observers in challenging joint missions and also provided significant joint missions, providing strategic readiness. 5,000 Indian troops are presently deployed where you have the target. Was political sectors in RAA. In that, they have a battalion deployed to try and jump Syria and Israel. We carry out human tasks of sensitivity. Our operations use drawing lines of supporting government agencies and conducting events of all injuries on groups. Ready for
Afternoon, sir. Ambassador Mukherjee. Sir, good afternoon.
Actually, you don't refer to. He thinks best on his feet. Speaks slow. We missed you on that essay on just about managing to play by round of golf. Is he alive? You know, in Bangalore,
Before we start the event today, let's all stand and pay homage to the fallen peacekeepers for 30 seconds. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please settle down. On behalf of Director General USI, it is my proud privilege to extend a very warm welcome to Lieutenant General Satish Nambiar, Ambassador Ashok Mukherjee, Lieutenant General J.S. Lidder, Lieutenant General Rakesh Kapoor, he'll be joining us shortly, and Mr. Shambi Shah, the UN Resident Coordinator in India, present force commanders, peacekeepers, USI members of diplomatic community in Delhi, service officers, virtually connected participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. Indeed, we are thankful to you all to have joined us for this event today. 29th May was designated as the International Day of UN Peacekeepers on 11 December 2002 to pay tribute to all the men and women, military, police, and civilians who have served and continue to serve in the UN peacekeeping operations for their high level of professionalism, dedication, and courage, and to honor the memory of those who have lost their life in the cause of peace. This is the date in 1948 when the first UN peacekeeping mission, United Nations Truth Supervision Organization, UNTSO, it continues even today, began operation in Palestine. This year's International Day, under the theme, The Future of Peace Operations, reflects on the evolving nature of peace operations in the very complex world today. In this background, USI organized this symposium on 75 years of Indian contribution to the UN peacekeeping from 1950 to 2025 in honor of all the peacekeepers and pay tribute to our fallen heroes. Over the last 80 years, more than 20 lakh men and women from 125 countries have served under the UN flag in more than 71 UN peacekeeping operations. And presently, more than 60,000 civilians, military, and police personnel are serving in 11 ongoing UN missions. Till date, India has contributed more than 2,90,000 personnel in more than 51 UN peacekeeping missions. And presently, approximately 5,800 are deployed in 9 out of the 11 ongoing peacekeeping missions. India is first to contribute an all-women formed police unit in 2007, and in continuation of this legacy, present female engagement teams are deployed in Congo, South Sudan, and Nepal. Despite increasingly complex challenges and criticism, peacekeepers remain committed to their pursuit of peace, but it is at a cost. Till date, 4,433, as on 30th April 25, peacekeepers have lost their life in the cause of the peace. Out of this, 182 are from India, the highest among any troop contributing country. To mark this International Day at the UN headquarters, UN Secretary General will lay a wreath today at Peacekeeping Memorial at 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time, that is approximately 9.5 hours from now. It will be followed by award of thanks, called medal to the fallen peacekeepers posthumously at 3 p.m. Today, from India, Brigadier Amitabh Jha, who was serving in the Golan Heights, and Havaldar Sanjay Singh, who was serving in the Congo mission, will be posthumously awarded the medal. UN Secretary General will also present the UN Military General Advocate of the Year Award to the women peacekeepers. This year, a woman peacekeeper from Ghana is being awarded, and last year it was the Radhika Sen from India. Similarly, the UN Women Police Officer of the Year Award goes to a woman peacekeeper from Sierra Leone, and both the women peacekeepers are presently serving in Abyei. To commence today's proceeding, may I now request Major General B.K. Sharma, Director General USI, for the opening address.
Respected General Nambiar, representatives from different missions in India, seniors, USI members, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for us to organize this event today, which is a very somber day, and it's in keeping with the deep commitment of the UN Charter and our unflinching belief in international peace and security. We know that India's association with the UN started in 1950 in Korea, wherein we had fielded about 275,000 troops, including women peacekeepers, presently in about 50 missions. And we remain the most significant and dependable troop and police contributors in the United Nations. What stands out for India is that I think our propensity to undertake very high risk missions in the conflict zones. For example, in Congo crisis in 1960, we undertook combat role under Chapter 7 and conducted the earliest air operations when Canberras were deployed. Besides that, we also had very good achievements in Operation Ram Punch and Operation Grand Slam, which set the template for future peace enforcement operations. Likewise, in Somalia in 1990s, Indian contingent operated in urban war zones like Mogadishu under very hostile conditions torn by the politics of warlords and asymmetric warfare. And we rendered a yeoman's service during that operation. Likewise, in South Sudan in 2013, we participated in Boa Siege, where Indian peacekeepers defended the UN base under extreme odds, saving thousands of lives. Another example is in Sierra Leone, Operation Kukri, where we did joint planning and rescued about 223 peacekeepers. It is not only in the combat conditions, but other domains of peacekeeping, for example, undertaking civic action program and under the spirit of what we call as Sadbhavna experience, respecting the cultural map of those countries, the empathy, compassion, which is very, very natural to Indian soldiers. And another major contribution from India has been to set up this Center for UN Peacekeeping. And the father of this center is here, General Satish Nambiar. It is kind courtesy, his, I think, thought, his actions, his initiative, that today it has become a global node of excellence.
And I'm sanguine that India has much more to contribute in terms of, strategic thought leadership. We've been pointing out the reforms that are needed in UN peacekeeping operations because in the present day context, neither Chapter 6 nor Chapter 7 are adequate enough to meet the multidimensional nature of peacekeeping operations. There are issues of technology, non-government organizations, local communities. So USI has also been the forefront to set the agenda for reform. And that is how what we did here is the Challenges Forum, which set the stage for what you call as the Pact for the Future. So I'm sure that with our collective efforts, we will keep the UN flag high and see that these reforms are ushered in due course of time in keeping with the geopolitical and the strategic security needs of the future. Without further ado, hand over to Jan Goswami. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Before I request Jan Satish Nambiar for the keynote to address a brief introduction, Jan Nambiar, a veteran of 1965 and 71 war, former first head of the mission and the force commander, UN Protection Force in Yugoslavia, and former director of the USI of India. He is a well-known and acclaimed personality on the issues related to the UN peacekeeping. And in fact, he laid the foundation of what today's USI contribution to the UN peacekeeping is there by establishing the UN Center for Peacekeeping at USI in 2000. He also served on the high-level panel on the threats, challenges, and change, which was established by the UN Secretary General of the Peace Building Commission in 2003. General recipient of the third highest Indian Army Gallantry Award of Veer Chakra and Padma Bhushan, the second highest civilian honor of India. May I request General Satish Nambiar to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you, Pradeep. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and a privilege to be here on this podium. A couple of reasons, of course, have been mentioned, but probably some of you are not aware that I assumed charge of this institution as the director on the 1st of July 1996 and set it up here. So it's a long voyage, nostalgic voyage since that I have been requested to come and be with you this morning. Now, he asked me whether I'd like to sit and speak or would like to stand. Having been an infantryman all my life, I had to stand because an infantryman thinks and speaks and best on his feet. And probably may not be able to do that for very much longer, but I'll try all this. It's true. Are you okay now? Yeah, I should realize because I'm deaf, so most of you are also. Anyway, let me start by saying that during much of the 80-year history of the United Nations as an organization, of all its activities, UN peacekeeping operations have attracted maximum attention, primarily because it makes dramatic news and the deployment of because conflicts make dramatic news, and deployment of international military forces by the Security Council to preserve a fragile peace, as it were, makes a good story that captures public interest in this electronic age. As it evolved over the years, peacekeeping became an extraordinary art that called for the use of military personnel not to wage war, but to prevent fighting between belligerents, to ensure the maintenance of ceasefires, and to provide a measure of stability in an area of conflict where negotiations were conducted. Of course, the publicity generated by its peacekeeping activities in the past had, for the most part, been beneficial to the UN, especially in times when the organization did not otherwise enjoy public confidence or credibility. However, since the 1990s, with the deployment of UN forces in intrastate conflicts and civil war situations where there were perceived inadequacies, even peacekeeping operations have drawn adverse comment at times. There can be little doubt that UN peace operations are at a crossroad. The last 3 decades have severely tested the concept, philosophy, and manner of conduct of these operations. The Horta panel report that was put out in the public domain a couple of years back makes an effort to address some of the issues. It, however, goes beyond UN peacekeeping to the wider spectrum of peace operations, of which peacekeeping is only a part. Even so, I think the recommendations made by that panel mostly reiterate the points made in Boutros Ghali's 1992 Agenda for Peace document and the Brahimi panel report of 2000. Now, in any discussion on the subject, it is important to distinguish between the concept of collective security and peacekeeping in the international environment. Whereas collective security is a punitive process designed to be carried out with some degree of discrimination, but not necessarily impartially. Peacekeeping is intended to be politically impartial and essentially non-coercive. Hence, UN peacekeeping was and has always been based on a triad of principles that gave it legitimacy as well as credibility, namely consent of the parties to the conflict, impartiality of the peacekeepers, and the use of force by lightly armed peacekeepers only in self-defense. Now, all of these 3 principles have been under severe strain in the last 3 decades. The premise on which UN peacekeeping was based is that violence in interstate and intrastate conflict can be controlled without resort to the use of force or enforcement measures. No doubt, there are many theorists, and one may dare say quite a few practitioners, who are of the view that force needs to be met with force. However, an objective analysis of the history of conflicts possibly reveals that the use of force and enforcement measures, particularly in internal conflicts, tend to prolong the conflict rather than resolve it speedily. This is not, however, to suggest that the use of force be discounted altogether. In certain circumstances, use of force may well be called upon or called for as a catalyst for peaceful resolution. And in this context, I've often quoted something which was attributed to Al Capone. I don't know whether many of you have heard of this character, but he's a notorious Chicago gangster of the early 20th century. And he is reported to have said that you can get a lot more done with a kind word when you have a gun in your hand than with a kind word alone. So that's the context in which the use of force can be interpreted. And in any case, I think the use of force in UN peacekeeping is not a new phenomenon. As I think one of them just mentioned in the introduction, the UN force in the Congo in the early 1960s was mandated to use force to deal with Katangi secessionists led by Moses Shombe. And an Indian brigade-sized contingent undertook combat operations to stabilize the situation. But it was at great cost. 26 killed and 36 killed and 124 wounded. Among those who were killed was one of my contemporaries from the academy, Captain Gurbachan Singh Salaria, who was awarded our highest gallantry award, the Paramveer Chakra, for that operation. So those bring back certain memories. The fact is, it's a heavy price to pay for a peacekeeping operation. Similar operations were undertaken again by the Indian contingent in Sierra Leone to rescue hostages taken by rebel forces in 1999. Hence, the use of force for the protection of civilians is not an issue that merits debate or discussion, certainly not for us in the Indian forces. It is a task that UN peacekeepers should be and must be prepared to undertake when required. The dilemmas, however, that arise in the process must be recognized and addressed. That is important. One, the UN Security Council must mandate the use of force. Of course, that is no doubt easily done, particularly because those who mandate do not provide the boots on the ground, as it were, at the moment. Two, adequate resources must be provided, both manpower and equipment, for effective implementation of the mandate. As also political backup support. And on both counts, unfortunately, insofar as resources and backup support is concerned, the situation at the ground level, as my colleagues who have commanded forces will back, it's quite disappointing. And that's, of course, been reiterated even in the HOTA panel report that was put out. Three, we must accept the fact that in the combat operations that are undertaken, there will be casualties. To UN personnel taking part, personnel from the opposing rebel forces, and possibly some collateral impact on innocent civilians caught up in the fighting. Four, having taken sides in the local conflict, the blue helmets become party to the conflict and are hence perceived as legitimate targets later. You have to face that. Five, UN mediators and negotiators therefore could lose their legitimacy and credibility with those against whom the operations are undertaken. To that extent, I think I find references in the HOTA panel report to a designated enemy, preemptive use of force, and so on, somewhat disturbing. That's my personal view. Equally, I think, in that report, bringing responsibility to protect interventions into the debate on UN peace operations is, in my view, not only misplaced, but positively dangerous, because there are other connotations to it. And as I've always maintained, where the bad guy has been identified and needs to be dealt with, the option for the international community is not a UN peace operation, but Chapter 7 combat operations undertaken by multinational forces under an agreed lead nation or organization. Recent examples which one can quote are Operation Desert Storm, undertaken against Saddam Hussein in 1991 when he invaded Kuwait, and in Afghanistan against the Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden in October 2001, following the terrorist attacks in New York in September 2001. And of course, going all the way back to the Korean intervention in 1950. Now, something which I think doesn't often get much attention is, preventive action must be the focus of the United Nations if the organization is to regain its considerably eroded credibility and legitimacy. There's no doubt in my mind at the moment. The sad part is that it would appear that a vital element of this prevention action, namely preventive deployment, has not received much attention. And I say this because even the HOTA panel has not addressed this aspect with much seriousness in its report. And my personal experience of such deployment goes back to December 1992 on a request made by the then President Gligorov of Macedonia to Cyrus Vance, the UN Secretary General Special Envoy at the European Conference on the former Yugoslavia, and implemented by UNPROFOR, of which I was then the head of mission and the force commander. And that certainly did the job that was required at that time and saved a lot of fighting or possible that could have taken place. So that leads me to believe that this tool needs to be better understood and exploited. I have also long been an advocate of the imperative need to set up a standing UN rapid deployment force if the organization is to have the capacity to deploy quickly into a mission area following agreement between local belligerents and a decision is taken by the UN Security Council to deploy a peacekeeping force. I made an effort to have this recommendation included when I was a member of Kofi Annan's high-level panel on threats, challenges, and change, but unfortunately without any success. I couldn't convince my other colleagues. I noticed the HOTA panel has made a timid effort in this regard. The fact of the matter is that today it takes anything from 2 to 3 months for deployment to be effected after a Security Council resolution is passed. And the situation on the ground does not wait for the troops to come. And that's invariably to the detriment of the mission, of the objective of the mission. Another vital issue that I've been raising at every conceivable forum over the last couple of decades merits mention. Namely, that the developed world must get back to UN peacekeeping if such operations are to be effective. And the organization is to retain any credibility. Legitimacy, of course, is another matter. I won't go into that, given the current lack of representation from Africa and South America in the permanent membership category of the UN Security Council. I'm not talking about that. And I say this because it is the countries of the developed world that have the equipment, resources, and trained manpower so desperately required to make UN peacekeeping effective. There are some, I've heard, suggestions that the countries of the Western world prefer to operate under the auspices of NATO because of the inefficiency or incompetence of the UN system. That, I think, is, in my view, hypocrisy of the highest order. I have not noticed any such reluctance by countries of the Western world in garnering senior command positions in the UN missions that are deployed in the field, or in securing senior military and police staff positions at the headquarters of the missions that are now deployed. A point often made in justification of this arrangement, of course, is that the countries of the Western world are the ones that make significant financial contribution to the UN, and hence they are entitled to such positions in UN headquarters and mission areas. Fine. But I would like to say that that is a myth, and I address that from personal experience. As I mentioned, I was also, besides being the force commander at FUNPROFOR, I was also the head of mission. So therefore, the Civil Affairs Department, the Civil Police, and also the administration was under my oversight. I therefore know for a fact that at that time, now I'm talking of 1992-93, don't hold me to any latest data on the subject. Every single contract, whether it was for provision of aircraft, helicopters, vehicles, provisions, bottled water, maintenance of equipment, communications, or whatever, was in the hands of the countries of the developed world, who I think therefore got back from the UN system as much, if not more, than what they ostensibly contributed to the organization. Now, don't misunderstand the point that I'm making. It is just that one has to address it. Maybe it's being addressed. It has been addressed over the last few years. Possible. I don't know. I'm talking, as I said, of 1992-93. And finally, as mentioned by my colleagues earlier, it is with some pride I wish to place on record the fact that in order to build our expertise and experience in this field of UN activity, as the director of this institution in 2000, with support from the Ministries of External Affairs and Defense and the Army Headquarters, I had the privilege of setting up the Center for UN Peacekeeping. That was in September 2000. The center is no longer with the USI now, it's on its own, not too far away. The center, besides overseeing the training of our contingents earmarked for peacekeeping operations, undertakes conduct of training courses for our subunit commanders, military observers, and officers earmarked for deputation on staff appointments. But what I would like to stress is that it's a measure of our commitment, I think, India's commitment to the United Nations, that a minimum of 15 vacancies on each of these courses, if I'm not wrong, it was so, are offered to developing countries with all expenses on travel from home country and back, training, accommodation, and meals borne by the Government of India, Ministry of External Affairs. They only have to pay for their shopping, that's all. Now, a number of developed countries also, like the USA, the UK, Australia, Japan, Norway, etc., they subscribe to these courses on a self-financing arrangement. But I think what gives me great satisfaction is that in the last 25 years, the Center for UN Peacekeeping has established itself internationally as a center of excellence and is now often called upon to conduct specialized international courses on behalf of the UN Department of Peacekeeping Operations. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your views on the theme of the event today. You highlighted the various complexities in the ongoing peace operations and talked about some way forward how these may be handled in future. More will be dwelled upon the subject by Ambassador Mukherjee in due course of time. Now we've begun with the session on the overview of India's contribution to the UN peacekeeping. India has a distinguished history of participating in the UN peacekeeping and has contributed more persons and made more sacrifices than any other country. The philosophy of India's commitment revolves around our national ethos, ancient traditions, and since the ancient time, as per our social, cultural, and religious ethos, India has always prayed for the world peace and emphasized support to humanity. This is reflected very clearly in our age-old Indian shlokas like Sarve Bhavantu Sukhna, Sarve Santu Niramaya. Similarly, the ever-prevalent Indian philosophy of Vasudev Kutumbakam emphasizes unity, interconnectedness, and includes an understanding of that the whole world and humanity is one family. It highlights that India's contribution towards world peace is deeply ingrained in our philosophy, policies, and the actions. India is a land of unity in diversity, home to multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multilingual society that has coexisted for millennia. This resulted in the creation of a pluralistic and tolerant society. This remarkable heritage is deeply ingrained in the Indian character and reflected in our troops and police personnel in the mission areas. As a result, Indian peacekeepers can appreciate and respect the different cultures and effectively connect with the local populations in the mission areas. This helps in building trust, leading to greater acceptance and maintaining peace in the conflict zone and results in the effective peacekeeping. Thus, India's contribution to the UN peacekeeping are not merely calculated engagements, but a reflection of its civilizational and the cultural values, ethnic foreign policy. India's long-standing contribution to the UN peacekeeping has not only strengthened its commitment to fulfill the UN mandate, but has also provided valuable learning experience. The root of India's peacekeeping goes back to the first humanitarian contribution to the Korean conflict, along with the Neutral Nations Repatriation Commission, along with the custodian force, and then moved on to Indochina, UN Emergency Force in Egypt and Gaza, and followed by major contributions in the Lebanon, Congo, Iran, Iraq, Angola, Namibia, Cambodia, Yugoslavia, Somalia, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ethiopia and Eritrea, and ongoing missions in Cyprus, Golan Heights, Lebanon, Congo, South Sudan, and the Abyei. Over the years, with this vast learning experience, many lessons have been emerged and have been incorporated in our development of Indian peacekeeping ethos. This is basically in alignment with the Indian civilizational value. I'll highlight some of these. First is strict adherence to the principles of peacekeeping. India has firmly followed the three basic principles of the peacekeeping, that is consent of the parties, impartialities, and the non-use of force except in self-defense and defense of the mandate. India follows in letter and spirit and has made its peacekeepers accountable for any deviation. Professionalism. Professionalism underscores the Indian Armed Forces ecosystem. Indian Armed Forces have a first-hand, on-ground experience of counterinsurgency and counter-terrorism operations. Their outstanding professionalism has displayed in extensively complex operations in Korea, Congo, Cambodia, Somalia, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Yugoslavia, and South Sudan. From the professionalism flows out the leadership. Faith in the Indian leadership in the peacekeeping missions has been built over the years since they provided unambiguous directions with a clear vision and political courage. Experienced and committed peacekeepers like Lieutenant General Diwan Premchand, Major General Inderjit Rekhi, Lieutenant General P.S. Gyani, General K.S. Thimaya, Lieutenant General Satish Nambiar, Lieutenant General J.S. Lidder are the examples of transformative leadership. This resulted in a growing pool of Indian military officers seconded to the United Nations, whose professionalism and experience have contributed to the UN peacekeeping doctrine. The contribution in this regard by Lieutenant General Diwan Premchand and Major General Inderjit Rekhi is seminal in this context. Major General Inderjit Rekhi continuously served under the UN flag for 17 years. From leadership flows the lookout for the effective performance. Leadership role given to the Indians is in a very complex and invariably the challenging missions. That itself speaks of the faith and guarantee of performance by the Indian leaders. Major Inderjit Rekhi, I'm corrected, operated continuously for 17 years with the United Nations and the first military advisor to the UN Secretary General for two consecutive Secretary Generals from 1960 to 67. As well as he was led or head of the few missions. As military advisor, he was responsible for operation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, Burundi, West Iran, Yemen, and Cyprus. Special assignments included as advisor to the Secretary General during Cuban crisis, chief of UN observation mission in Dominican Republic, and participant in the Siple Rikia mission to Jordan and Israel in 1965. These were his contribution. General Diwan Premchand, famous of Congo and Katanga, he was the divisional commander during a very critical phase. Then UN peacekeeping force in Cyprus during a conflict, when a major conflict he avoided, and as a negotiator during the transition of Rhodesia to Zambia and Zimbabwe, and finally the mission at Namibia. He had retired, and the Secretary General, with a lot of stress against him, he still took him and appointed him in advance in 1980. And he continued for 8 years working behind the screen till the time mission took off in 1989 and Namibia. General Thimaya, chairman of the Neutral Nation Repatriation Committee at the Korea, and he effectively handled the thorny issue of prisoners of war who didn't want to return to their own country, and later had a post commander in Cyprus. Jan Nambiar, the first head of the mission and the force commander in the former Republic of Yugoslavia, established this difficult and complex mission with a notable depth of understanding and vision, and provided a resolute operational leadership to diverse forces under his command. General Leader was the force commander when the first mission in Sudan was established, and after retirement, UN entrusted him with a critical role in Sudan as a deputy SRSG political. His meaningful contribution to the political reconciliation, peace and stability played a major role in South Sudan referendum leading to becoming an independent country. Similarly, our leadership of the permanent representatives of India at the United Nations also mattered in various aspects. Conflict management. The fact that the force can be legally used doesn't always mean that it should be used. India's stand is that always been that the use of force must be calibrated and only be used after all other options have been exhausted. A case in point is in January 1963, when Major General, subsequently Lieutenant Diwan Premchand, as a divisional commander of Katanga sector in Congo. In this particular case, he rolled on to open the passage to the that time Rhodesia. There was a lot of resistance by the rebels, and he rolled the complete armored column in that. The situation reached that stage that the Mr. Thombe, he was the rebel leader, and he knew what is the likely to be the effect of that. In fact, he led the UN complete convoy, telling his rebel not to open the fire, otherwise they will be massacred. This was the way he handled the situation. This gentleman was under the UN custody for 48 hours. He was released before 24 hours before the operation with the intent, telling him the complete thing, what UN wants to do in case there is any resistance. So this is the way how General Diwan Premchand handled the situation at that particular level. Empathy for a local population. The center of gravity of any peace operation remains the local population. Poor operating environment, lack of development, poor connectivity, continuous resource exploitation, lack of development, and all these prevailing conditions in the local population to the host countries resonate with our peacekeepers. Thus, Indian peacekeepers with a human approach adopt to their needs, and it is quite reflective that they are accepted for their peacekeeping role by the local population. An apt example of this is the mutual learning of languages and singing of Indian national anthem and Hindi songs by the children and the local population where the Indian troops are deployed. Protection of civilians and the gender sensitivity. India being a multi-ethnic, multilingual, and multi-religious society, peacekeepers understand the difference and serve the host nation with adaptive impartiality, without any consideration for the various differences. Whenever and wherever the local population needs support, Indian peacekeepers willingly extend helping hand and the hand of humanitarian support in whatever form possible at that particular moment. India was the first country to deploy a female police unit in Liberia in 2007, and it continued in that country for more than 10 years. And the effect was when in 2007, total intake to the local police was 6%. In 10 years, it increased to 17%. So they acted as a role model for the local girls and the ladies. And presently, the female engagement team in South Sudan and Niger and the community liaison assistant for the Congo is ongoing. These initiatives have empowered the local communities and set a precedent for the gender-inclusive peacekeeping. Their interaction with the locals made a difference and further added to the credibility of the Indian peacekeeping. I'll just quote here the Under Secretary General Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Department of Peace Operations, UN, said that the present Indian engagement platoon in Abyei and the Congo are exemplifying the impact of women in peacekeeping. This was a statement given this year in February 2025 when he was here in Delhi for the one event being conducted by the Indian Army Center for UN Peacekeeping. Police officers, Ms. Shakti Devi, deployed in Afghanistan, was awarded the International Female Peacekeepers Award in 2014 for her exceptional achievement in leading the establishment of Women Police Council in Afghanistan. In 2019, Major Suman Gawani was honored with the UN Military Advocate of the Year Award for her service in the South Sudan. And similarly, in 2023, Major Radhika Sen was awarded UN Military Gender Advocate of the Year Award for outstanding work in Congo. Grassroots development and the nation building. Indian peacekeepers' efforts are focused on bringing lasting peace to the war-torn countries and then assisting in nation building. The local population needs the basic necessity of life for which Indian peacekeepers have been using the integral resources to provide humanitarian assistance, infrastructure development, and capacity building. These micro-level, quick impact projects lead to long-term efforts of the UN peacekeeping. Indian creativity. Indians are exceptionally innovative and adaptive by employing unconventional methods, that is the jugards, to resolve the problems at hand. This is being practiced extensively in the mission area. In case of Korean War, against the communist forces, when the 60 para field ambulance had to withdraw, they had no vehicles and they didn't want to leave the equipment bank. They found an abandoned train and they luckily had one person who knew how to drive the engine, but there was no water. So they made a beeline from the close by river to the train and with the bucket they filled the boiler and moved the train, and they just happened to cross the river. By that time, the communists had blown the bridge. So they were given a nickname of Bucket Brigade. Similarly, the refurbishing of schools, play fields, and resuscitating the dried well by Indian peacekeepers is all part of quick thinking and innovative with the local material. I remember a greenhouse which was created in Lebanon by the Indian battalion by making use of plastic bottles filled with the local soil, and it became quite a temperature controlled room. So this was, once they made it, it was being followed by the locals. So these are the way this thing. Then missions in Congo and Lebanon made provision of Jaipur food being made available to the local population in their campus, though for the mine casualties. To conclude, I'll say that India's strength lies in its capacity to undertake peacekeeping operations in any terrain, any social milieu, or adverse situation. Thus, India can play a more prominent role in strategically utilizing its field experience for a more structured and strategic approach to peacekeeping. India's future peacekeeping approach should enhance in global standing and diplomatic influence by linking peacekeeping activities to its wider foreign policy objectives. Gentlemen, now we move to the next theme, next subject, that is the leadership. In fact, the leadership plays a pivotal role in shaping organizational culture and guiding strategic direction and ensuring sustainable goals which are to be achieved by the peacekeeper. Effective leaders are visionary who not only set goals but also inspire their team to achieve them. To throw some light on the strategic leadership in the UN peacekeeping, our next speaker is Lieutenant General J.S. Lidder, Indian Army veteran with vast UN experience in both political and military sphere. He was Chief of Staff in mission in Mozambique, Post Commander, and subsequently Deputy SRSG political in Sudan. He will share his view virtually. So over to General Lidder.
Thank you, General Goswami. Am I seen and heard? Hello?
Yes,
Please
sir.
confirm that I'm being seen and heard.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Jai Hind and good evening. Let me congratulate the USI on organizing the symposium of 75 years of Indian contribution in peacekeeping. Let us also pay respect to over 1 million peacekeepers who have served in over 70 missions in UN peacekeeping lifespan. Importantly, pay homage, as was done in the morning, to over 4,000 who have fallen during service. We are in difficult times. We are facing and living in a fragmented global landscape with geostrategic competition. The UN peacekeeping has either underperformed or not performed at all. Yet it retains the relevance and legitimacy for international peace and security. The 2025 theme is the future of peacekeeping, on which I have written a number of articles. More importantly, that the UN peacekeeping needs a strategic reset. Hopefully, they should be out in the USI yearbook in the next few days. The peacekeeping narrative has undergone a fundamental change. It is necessary for the UN leaders to understand and adapt to the contemporary conflicts and the evolving concepts. The peacekeeping operating environment faces unprecedented instability, targeted violence to the peacekeepers, and humanitarian distress, with huge amount of displacement. There is hybridization of conflicts which are transforming, undefined in space and time with new additional threats, unconventional, which includes terrorism and asymmetric threats, cyber, and climate. We live in the information age. Each peacekeeping activity, whether it is an act or inaction, has fast flowing communication effect and it generates strategic impact. It therefore follows that strategic leadership is delinked from the rank and appointment as we learn and understand in our three-tiered conventional concept. Even in the UN today, it gives three tiers of leadership: strategic, operational, tactical. Well, the tactical space has disappeared. There's nothing called tactics, there's nothing tactical space. So you are either operating operationally or strategically. Good leadership is central to effective peacekeeping, and at the heart of good leadership is the senior mission leadership team, which comprises the big seven: the SRSG, the two deputy SRSGs, the force commander, the police commissioner, the DMS, and the chief of staff. These big seven, which I have popularized in the UN, must get together with a common vision and give a condition, politic, both in all in the entire spectrum of activity, give a vision to the mission. They must get together in the morning or when the crisis occurs. More importantly, this vision must filter down to the field offices, where often the friction comes in between the heads of office or the military commanders due to various factors which I don't want to go into. I must convey that the biggest success of Sudan's story is the senior mission leadership synergy, which unfortunately has failed in many other missions. The rot has started from the top, as we all are aware of it. Deployment. The deployment of leaders requires three factors, I feel. One is skill resilience. Now, what do I mean by skill resilience? We are used to a very theoretical way of leadership attributes and virtues as listed there. And when you select people there and they land up there, moment they land up, things are totally different to what they saw. So you need a person who has a skill spectrum of adaptation. You may suddenly find that the thing which you went is not even there. That sort of leader qualities must come. Conditioned and structured minds are best kept away from the field offices, from the UN mission as of now. Second, integrative competence for three substantive mission objectives, which are the three mission objectives: political stability, safe and secure environment, and humanitarian support. Sadly, we continue to deploy leaders who are very good in their own profession, in their own pillars, but fail to understand the other side. And when we talk about cross-cutting training or cross-cutting results, they falter. I have always advocated that military people need to be trained quite a bit on political processes, because military observers became the main tool for conflict prevention. Similarly, the political people, unless they understand the full spectrum of the use of force, because a lot of them think use of force is use of firepower, and unless they understand the complete spectrum, they will not be able to understand the military operation, especially when the things start going wrong. And lastly, the deployment, I want to talk about ethical uprightness for the protection of civilians. Civilians have to be protected, period. There's no discussion on that. There is no other view. So if you have landed up there, the degree and the other methodologies can differ. But any person who are there has got reservations for protection of civilians, better don't go there. You can sit there and plan for the rest of the people. Let the people go there who are ethically and morally obliged to save every life at the cost of their own life, like the humanitarian community and the ICRC are doing presently in Gaza. Employment of leaders. Think strategic and act operational. This is the quotation in my Peace Operation Training Institute lesson, which is called Leading Within the United Nations, which has now been accepted in the UN across the board. I will say again, think strategic and act operational. Physical maneuver is essential for the ground pulse. With technology coming in and virtual facilities available, there is the tendency to fortress yourself, because safety and security becoming a major issue inside compound walls, which are becoming higher and higher day by day. That's not the way to move. You have to be on the ground. You have to role model not only risk taking, but to others. Horse sense of the leaders must remain. Mental maneuver. What is mental maneuver? It is vision to stay ahead of the story arc. And number two, constructive challenge for out-of-box thinking and review. The basic problem in the UN today, we are deploying theoretical leaders who are structured and trained in good class books. So they're very good leaders in training establishment, etc. Moment they land up there, things are not what they thought, and they now they fall back on their scenarios, they fall back in the textbooks and look for a solution which is not there. Information. We are fighting the narrative wars. Nobody knows us better than us in the last few weeks of May. It is a narrative war in space, and you got to dominate this narrative war. So generating information advantage is critical. Two aspects are required of the UN leaders. One is an authentic mission narrative, and number two, credible messaging. Unless you do this, you will get in a loop of fake messaging or misinformation or disinformation, which has happened in Congo and elsewhere. So when you have a credible narrative and you have tools and the right audience to which it is given, you will proactively preempt the misinformation curve that comes in. Decisive decision making. Technology is now available in a wide framework. However, technology can only assist you in information flow, information assistance, and gaining knowledge. But the decision has to be of the human being, of the human face. Leaders have to, I hear everywhere a lot of technology, and I pull back because those people who become enslaved to technology, you will lose the battle in day one because the technology can become a single point of failure. I can tell you that. We need to get to the old school. The horse sense should never be got rid of. Risk opportunity balance. You will never get an ideal opportunity to take a decision. All the time, there are risks, there are opportunities. Indecision is no decision. For a military commander or a political leader who's in a violent form, you have to take a decision. And that's one quality, again, when I say skill, resilience, the risk opportunity comes in that. Lastly, on the decision making, I'll come to junior leaders. The peacekeeping battle is decentralized to junior leaders. We have to train and empower our junior leaders for critical decision making. Mistakes will happen, and we must learn to accept mistakes as learning opportunities and not basis for castigation. Let me come to host nation relationship. We are in thick waters as far as this is concerned. And just making excuses and blaming the host nations is not good enough. There has to be introspection carried inside. When you have gone to support a population and support a host nation, and that host nation is telling you to get out, there is something drastically wrong with your mandate and with your own ability. So host nation relationship and host nation trust now, if you ask me, has become most predominant factor in contemporary peacekeeping. Three factors. Firstly, sovereign respect and tribal impartiality. We went both wrong on this in South Sudan because the President Salva Kiir was a Dinka and a Nuer. The Riek Machar is a Nuer. And I know both of them well. And that's where the trouble started. Because when you, as the senior mission leadership, cannot differentiate between who's the president and which ethnic clan does he belong, your impartiality gets questioned straight away. Number two, institutionalize local support. And when I mean local support, I mean the local stakeholders. I am being the local resources. Please use them for green peacekeeping. And lastly, the communities to be involved. Lastly, on the host nation is long-term commitment for capacity building. Let me now come to the end of training and performance. Training is a leadership responsibility and a command function. We need to build a strategic culture and a culture of continuous on-job learning for mission reviews. This compartmentalization, pre-deployment, this deployment, STMs doesn't work. It is a continuous continuum. You get your pre-deployment training, you have the basic knowledge. Now you go back. The conflict is totally different to what you do, and you adapt yourself, learn, get onto a learning curve, and it's continuous on-job learning. You're learning on-job all the time, and mission reviews must come in with that. Let me end by saying comprehensive performance and conduct accountability. Every peacekeeper being deployed has to be responsible for their own performance and their conduct. As I always say, inaction is an action. This culture of just landing up there in status quo and carrying out play safe has to stop. If there are people dying there, there are people responsible for them. And a lot of time I feel the fault lies within. I will finish off there and I'll be ready to the question. Thank you, Goswami.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your insight on this aspect of the leadership. And you brought out the few various aspects. Main important thing is that leader has to be willing to adopt to the various circumstances. Now move on to the next event, to the next subject. In the evolving geopolitical milieu, the relevance of UN peacekeeping is being questioned in the various quarters. Has peacekeeping lost its shine? So what is the future of peacekeeping? Our next speaker, Ambassador Mukherjee, will analyze this aspect. Few words about the speaker. Ambassador Mukherjee is a well-known Indian diplomat besides holding various important diplomatic assignments, was most successful permanent representative of India to the UN, and during his tenure, he successfully spearheaded the acceptance of Indian proposal to declare 21st June as the International Yoga Day by the UN in record time of 75 days. He also convinced the UN to launch a virtual memorial wall in memory of Indians fallen UN peacekeepers because we are the highest among the troop contributing countries, and he launched this in 2015. And the current initiative of the UN General Assembly to construct a memorial wall for the UN peacekeeper in the UN headquarters, which is going on, is outcome of what he initiated at this time. His book, India and the United Nations 1945-2015, a photo journey, is among 7 published books, and the first copy of book was presented by Prime Minister Narendra Modi to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon in September 2015. Over to Ambassador Ashok Mukherjee.
Thank you, Jan Goswami, for that introduction. I wanted to, first of all, of course, use this day, this opportunity to pay homage to all the peacekeepers, to the peacekeeping missions. This day is also, in my mind, linked with efforts to bridge gaps between belligerents. On this day in 1948, Count Folke Bernadotte of Sweden was assassinated in Jerusalem. The New York Times has a archived front page. Those of you interested can look at it and think about where we are in 2025. We are not very far away from what he confronted and gave his life for. Now, I wanted to build upon what General Lidder just spoke and look at the future of peacekeeping from 3 different perspectives. The first is regarding the mandates of peacekeeping operations. How are the future mandates likely to be constructed, to be agreed upon? And I think that those of us who have been following the regular debates on renewal of mandates of existing peacekeeping operations know that it is becoming more and more difficult for the United Nations Security Council to agree on the mandate and to roll over the mandate. The difficulty is because of the lack of the disconnect, as has been said by earlier speakers, between the troop contributing countries and the United Nations Security Council's 5 permanent members. Despite a provision in the Charter, Article 44, for troop contributing countries who are not elected to the Security Council, but who have contributed their troops to the operation, despite the provision in the Charter for these countries to have direct discussions with the Security Council before the deployment of their troops, the permanent 5 members have steadfastly refused to honor this provision of the UN Charter. And therefore, the disconnect, which was recognized 20 years ago, almost in 2005 by the United Nations Summit, which mandated the reform of the Security Council to make it more effective on the ground, continues and has grown. It has grown because of several factors, but primarily the reason why this disconnect has grown is the withdrawal or the fading away of the leadership of the country, that's one country which created the United Nations process, the United States. It is today a very sad situation when, because of domestic laws, the host country, the United States, refuses to give visas to the officials of South Sudan who have to travel to New York for discussing the mandate for the United Nations mission in South Sudan. It is really a travesty, but it illustrates the kind of challenge that now exists on the ground. The third reason why there is a challenge to the formulation of mandates is because there's a confrontation within the 5 permanent members, which existed from 1949, from the year that NATO was created, by 3 permanent members against 1, the other Soviet Union. But today that confrontation has become, in a sense, multi-aligned. The United States has its own agenda. France has its own agenda. The United Kingdom, we do not know, but I assume they have their own agenda. And Russia has its own agenda. And so I would say for this audience, so does China. In the discussions on UN peacekeeping, the role and influence of China is very often not heard. But I would urge those in this room and those listening to what we are talking about today to keep an eye on China. But the end result of all this is that each of these permanent members contributes in its own way to the challenge of formulation of UN mandates for peacekeeping. And the end result is that the priority of Chapter 6 of the UN Charter for the peaceful settlement of disputes, the very elaborate menu in Article 33 of different ways of peacefully resolving disputes through what our Prime Minister often calls dialogue and diplomacy, that is completely lost sight of. And the priority of peacekeeping, which is to engineer a political settlement, has been completely forgotten. We talked about South Sudan. That's the example which is before us. The maximum number of our soldiers are deployed in South Sudan. And that is an illustration of how the lack of a political settlement, which in a sense is also linked to a clear exit date for peacekeeping, is not visible. And it is affecting mandate formulation. And of course, the fourth point is something that none of us want to talk about openly, but in the face of an ineffective United Nations Security Council, the role of the Security Council given by the Charter of maintaining international peace and security has been usurped by either proxies of the permanent members or by non-state actors or by regional groupings. And therefore, there's a very chaotic situation on the ground. And you have to just see the situation in Africa and West Asia to understand what I mean. Now, in terms of the second area for the future of peacekeeping, of deployments, what I've said just now about mandate formulation has a direct impact on deployments. And the failure of the Security Council to prioritize political settlements is aggravated by Article 12 of the Charter, which says very clearly that as long as the Security Council has the item on its agenda, has the dispute on its agenda, there is no role for the United Nations General Assembly. So we are stuck in a situation in which the Security Council does not act, does not want to act, or cannot act. And instead of going automatically through the Charter to the General Assembly, from where these Security Council elected members have come from, we are kept away completely from the subject. And in the meantime, as General Leader pointed out, civilians suffer. Civilians get killed, destruction takes place, nothing can be done. The United Nations is seen as a complete waste of time. And I think that this is something that is important to recognize, and perhaps to take us back to what General Goswami talked of the Korean War. There was a short window of about 2 or 3 months when the Security Council, for its own internal working procedures, was not able to take a decision on deploying the peacekeeping mission in Korea. And it was the General Assembly which convened under the Uniting for Peace provision and authorized the contributions by individual member states to the mission, which eventually got regularized as a peacekeeping mission. But I think it's time to look at how to empower the General Assembly in this context. The second thing about deployments is what is the threat before us and those of us who have dealt with discussions on peacekeeping or on the ground in peacekeeping know it very well, which is the cancer of terrorism. Now, when this cancer of terrorist threats and attacks on UN peacekeepers began in 2012, 2013 in West Asia, there were attempts to brush it under the carpet. There were attempts to say that, we can manage, the UN can manage. We will make sure that the UN peacekeepers are not harmed, but do not raise this issue more and more. I think that time has gone. The chickens have come home to roost. Terrorism is today the single largest threat to UN peacekeeping. And the best example of what I've just said is to look at the now closed UN peacekeeping mission in Mali. Now, the country of Mali has undergone tremendous change. Some of you who have followed the developments in Mali know what I'm talking about. But one reason why the UN peacekeeping mission in Mali was asked to wind up was because more than 300 peacekeepers serving in MINUSMA were killed because of terrorist violence. This terrorist violence need not have occurred if the United Nations had acted in 2013 to prosecute and bring to justice those terrorists who took UN peacekeepers hostage in the United Nations peacekeeping mission in the Golan Heights, UNDOF. We had 46 Fijians, 23 Filipinos in 2 different batches taken hostage by the Jabhat al-Nusra. And today, when you see that the Jabhat al-Nusra is now the president of Syria, I think you would start wondering as to where this United Nations mainstreaming of terrorism by the Security Council is leading us to. And therefore, unless we act collectively to respond to the challenge posed by terror to UN peacekeepers, to soldiers on the ground, and here I speak, including what has happened in our own country a few weeks ago, unless terrorist violence is stopped in its tracks, it will be a cancer which will eat into any effort for peace and security. And of course, the third is the future of peacekeeping. Some reference was made to the new technologies, the new equipment, but I think that we need to be aware of the impact on deployments of applications that are already in use in conflict situations around the world, not only in areas where UN troops are deployed, like in the Congo, but also in conflicts in Europe and West Asia, where new technologies have been deployed. And unless we train our peacekeepers to respond or to counter the use of these technologies against their mandate, we will face a tremendous challenge. The third area is in terms of policy. And as has been said, the 3 cardinal principles of UN peacekeeping have been validated by our experience on the ground. I think this is an opportunity for India to take a lead in UN peacekeeping matters, given the atrophy and the challenges that I spoke of a little earlier. I think that the Center for UN Peacekeeping probably could play a lead role in establishing regional centers of UN peacekeeping in Africa and West Asia. This is an idea which has been discussed in the past. Japan took the initiative in Africa, in Kenya, to set up a peacekeeping center. Why should not India do that? Why should it be Japan? Because India has much more experience.
I don't know who the hell configured this.
Peace operations in future. Now we move from peacekeeping to peace building. UN peacekeeping helps host countries in conflict causes of conflict, laying the groundwork for the long-term peace. So is the peacekeeping the end? No, it's not so. Peacekeepers are often required to play an active role in peacemaking efforts, and may also be involved in early peace building activities. Peace building can include conflict prevention, conflict management and transformation, and post-conflict reconciliation. Our next speaker, Lieutenant General Rakesh Kapoor, Deputy Chief of Army Staff, Infosystem and CORD, will be addressing this issue from peacekeeping to peace building. Before I invite him, a brief introduction. General Officer, with his rich operational experience, held various staff, command, and instructional appointments. General Officer is a graduate of US Army War College and was advisor to Botswana Defense Forces. General commanded a corps in desert before assuming the present appointment. Presently, he oversees preparations and pre-induction training of Indian units and peacekeepers before deployment to the UN mission and also from friendly foreign countries. Over to General Kapoor.
Jen Lumber, sir, I must confess that what the Indian peacekeepers are doing, a lot of foundation was laid by you, and we are very grateful to you for that. Jen Sharma, Jen Goswami, Ambassador Mukherjee, Mr. Shambi Shah, members of the diplomatic community, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to be at the USI and to engage with you and have an exchange of thoughts. And this morning, when we were laying the wreath at the National War Memorial, the feeling of poignance because we've lost the maximum number of soldiers in peacekeeping, and actually a feeling of pride because we are happy that whoever we deployed for peacekeeping duties or under the flag of the United Nations, they really brought pride to the country. And I thank all of you who have been part of the system, whether in India or overseas, who've been part of this peace process. Thank you very much. There are a lot of recommendations that I've come through today, listening to all the illustrious speakers. But I thought before I come from transitioning from peacekeeping to peace building, I need to give you an overview as to what is actually happening today, or what is the government of India's standpoint on it. Firstly, sir, the CUNPK, sir, the Center for UN Peacekeeping, it has moved out of its embryonic stage, and it's a full-fledged peacekeeping institute. I would say it has a degree of international recognition. And we are creating a large number of collaborative mechanisms with multiple peacekeeping institutions across the world. And recently, we also conducted the first Global South Summit of women peacekeepers. And we had representation from over 40 countries. And this was purely an Indian initiative. The second thing is we continue to be amongst the largest troop contributing countries. And when we look at the operations in South Sudan, our fourth commander, General Mohan, is leading and surging it forward. And what he is doing is being appreciated across the globe. Secondly, when we look at operations going on in Congo, it is only the Indian battalion which is in and around Goma, which is actively involved in protection of civilians. What General Lider also mentioned, it is the sole aim is protection of civilians. So they're there. Even when we were doing a transition, we could not induct our brigade commander, but our brigade commander is right there at the heels with the force commander in MONUSCO, where operations are going. The third thing is, I think India is the only country which has female engagement teams with every contingent deployed. And there was one which the last one we would be deploying by the end of June, beginning of July. So this is the only country which has female engagement teams. This is what, whatever guidance, whatever advice that you all left us with, this is how we are following it up. And we will be happy to take more advice and take it forward. And we are willing to collaborate with any entity, any agency. And I also want to, in all these firsts, I forgot one first. I think India was the only country which took contingent from another country, that is Kazakhstan, in its own mission. So we actually deployed a multinational battalion under Indian leadership. And that's what we did in UNIFIL, sir. So coming down to this whole thing which General Goswami has left me, I thought he would give it to Ambassador Mukherjee, but he left peacekeeping to peace building to a uniformed person. I would just say that the absence of war is not peace. I think peace is a feel. There has to be justice. There has to be a feel of development. There has to be a feel of human security. There has to be a feel of general prosperity. That is peace. And today, when we look at what is the environment in our peacekeeping missions, what is really the operating environment when we deploy troops, or what is the environment in the mission area? It is characterized by a huge amount of political rivalry, huge amount of ethnic clashes. There is displacement of population taking place. There is gender exploitation taking place. There is trust deficiency. Security of civilian population is a challenge. Security of peacekeepers is also a challenge. There is presence of multiple groups, state actors, non-state actors, proxies, who are all operating with their own hidden agendas in the mission area. There are influencers who are, what General Lider also mentioned, who are spreading information, misinformation, trying to change the narrative there. There is weaponization of information. There is weaponization of technology. And disruption is the buzzword. And when we look at the contingents that are deployed there, there is a huge mismatch in expectations and capabilities. And that goes back to mandate formulation. So this is really the environment in which peacekeeping is taking place. And therefore, peacekeeping and peace building cannot be compartmentalized. And nor can it be sequential. That, you'll do peacekeeping, then you'll go to peace building. I think this relationship is very symbiotic. It has to be symbiotic. And therefore, if it has to be symbiotic, you have to do multiple things. And some of the suggestions that we bring forth is you have to have omnibus missions. When we talk about omnibus missions, the same mission and the same mandate must have peacekeeping, peace building, and humanitarian aspects included to it. So what will happen when you create a mandate like that? What is going to be the outcome? There will be a strategic context which will come into play. There will also be a people-specific context. And you will bring out a whole coherence to this whole peacekeeping, peace-building process. So this mandate formulation and omnibus mission is possibly the way forward. The next thing that needs to be done is you have to address the agents of change. And who are these agents of change? Women. Women are very big agents of change. And particularly where peacekeeping is going on, women are vicariously opinion makers. So you have to address them. And I'm very proud to say that India has addressed them. The second is the youth population. It can go south if you don't address it. So these agents of change have to be kept into mind. The second thing is, I think a huge challenge which lies in these places where conflict is going on is mental health. You have to address mental health. Even if you have to put specific teams for addressing mental health, you have to address it. And I'm happy to announce what we have done in India is we have put in every mission of ours psychological counselors who are there for local communities, who are facilitating mental health. The third thing is cultural sensitivity. So whichever nationality comes into the mission area must be culturally aware and culturally sensitive. Otherwise, we will never be able to build peace. Otherwise, we will only be enforcing peace. To build peace, you have to understand the sensitivities of those people. And a very important part is taking along regional players and local communities, because regional players understand the dividend of peace in that region. So they cannot be kept away from this. And one of the final suggestions to transition from peacekeeping to peace building is build capacities in the mission area. And what are these capacities? Whether capacities for health, capacities for education, capacities for engineering, and even if we have to bring private players to build capacities, generate employment through those capacities, I think this will go a long way in transitioning from peacekeeping. And something at the institutional level, particularly at the UN headquarters, is you need to have an institutional framework for this. You can't be so siloed in this whole framework. And what is the budget for this? The budget for peacekeeping is well articulated. If I was to announce, if what is available in open sources for the current year, the budget for peacekeeping is $5.6 billion US. But I just can't find the budget for peace building. It's nowhere there unless it is somewhere lying classified. I'm not aware of that. So this budgetary framework also has to be resolved when we look at this. There are many naysayers who say, then if it's peace building, then, the peacekeeping force has to be separate. The peace building force has to be separate. They come with different capacities. No, it has to be a uniform force. And since I'm a practitioner, what is the value that the uniformed community brings in a peacekeeping or peace building mission? I think one of the biggest values that the uniformed force brings into these missions is it gives you a sense of security. It gives you a sense of trust. It gives you a sense to enable humanitarian assistance. It enables capacity agencies to build capacity in the mission area. And above all, the uniformed force, when it comes into the mission area, it has the ability to operate under adversity. I think there is no other agency across the globe other than military forces of whichever nationality they belong to come with that capacity to operate under adversity. So in conclusion, I just leave you with what is the strategy to transition from peace building to from peacekeeping to peace building. I would say flame. A flame is not just for illumination or charting routes or way forwards, but flame is an acronym. The S in the flame stands for flexible financing. The L in the flame stands for local communities and local agencies. The A in the flame stands for adaptability. You have to be adaptable. Nothing like multiple speakers have said, When you go into the mission area, it's not what you thought it is going to be. It's going to be very different when you get into the mission area. And the M in the flame is a mechanism which is united in nature and not sequential. There's no difference between peace building and peacekeeping. And the E in the flame is empowered leadership. And if empowered leaders will ensure that peace building takes place. So if it's flame, we will transition from peacekeeping to peace building. And I thank USI as always for this opportunity to come and share some of my thoughts. And I once again compliment you for this excellent initiative on the 75 days of India's contribution towards peacekeeping. And we look forward to continued collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing the various contribution of the Indian peacekeepers in the ongoing mission and highlighting how peacekeeping and peace building overlap and the importance of capacity building. And finally, the acronym FLAME, which we have tried to explain it here. I hope we will be able to progress from this point onward and further add to our contribution to the UN peacekeeping. Now we'll have the open house for the question answer session.
We'll get one round of questions and then request the panelists to respond. Yes, sir.
Thank you to all the panelists for sharing some valuable ideas. But unfortunately, whenever I come here, I've been coming for the last 29 years from the day General Nambiar started this institution. I wonder whether peacekeeping is all that difficult. And the way we talk about it, that is something terrible. Can we do it or can't we do it? And to me, it's the simplest form of any military operation. It's just common sense. It's managing people. It's application of your resources. And rest is all semantics. Big terms I hear, changing names, calling Ashok Dilip tomorrow and Dilip Ashok some other day. It makes no difference. There's too much of discrimination being done. It's high time we as a nation, which is matured, large, and a big democracy, secular in nature, stop differentiating between women and men. It's peacekeepers, be they women or men. There can be no peacekeeping without women. Without women. It is the sum total of what men and women do in field. General Leader brought out strategic and operational. Yes, strategic is in Nova, where all the diplomacy works. Operational is in fields, where all the men on ground work, men and women. And there are two different skills, there are two different arts under one mandate, as the ambassador brought out. And the ambassador brought out the mandate is going to get more and more complicated. To me, the mandate is the start point, which should be the simplest. It is like the starting blocks for a relay race, on which you take the pressure and get going thereafter. We, the people of the UN, have complicated the mandate and we're making it more and more complicated because we are making it a task table. A mandate is not a task table. It's an operational directive. In very short terms, there are three simple sentences. It's like Modi saying, telling the Indian Army, the three chiefs, fight Pakistan and put an end to them. That's what he had told these three chiefs. I give you a free hand. He didn't start spelling out things. He didn't say how, why, and what. He left it to these operational people to do what they like. And that is what peacekeeping is all. Leave it to that man on the spot, the contingent commander. I do not agree with what you said, sir, of playing the game what the West had done some years ago when I was in New York and I had opposed it, of mixing contingents between nations to act as benevolence to these small nations, like what we've done to Tajikistan. Peacekeeping is very much a national act. You take pride in what you do. It goes by the name that you provide to that work of yours. Everybody says it's the Indians who did it. They don't say it's a mix of so many conditions. You'll find lots of problems in the coming years because there are legal problems, there are administrative problems, there are financial problems, there are budget problems, etc., etc. The other point I want to bring out, high time we call it peace support operations. We're making too much of difference, peacekeeping, peace building. And where to draw the curtain, where you're wanting a separate budget for peace building, you're not going to get it. The budget is one only for peacekeeping, which should be given a new name called peace support. And peace support operations is a process from peacekeeping to peace building. It goes through that agenda of peace, as General Nambiar had brought up, Bhutto's Gali gave the world. So, we are compartmentalizing too much, a thing which is too simple. Field and New York, that's all. New York sleeps while people in the field work because New York is to the west of the world. All peacekeeping is to the east of the world. So while we people are acting in field, they are sleeping. By the time they come to office, we are sleeping. So there's a mismatch, total mismatch, as I have realized myself when I was there. Now, where changes are needed when I come here and realize, and it's never discussed, sovereignty needs to be reclassified. What does it mean? The diplomats will know better. They are the ones who hold on to that term, sovereignty of nations, the national interest. There is no national interest in peacekeeping. It is global interest. It is the interest of peace. That's all. What do you mean by national interest in peacekeeping? I don't know what a failed state like Somalia or Sudan can give the world. Sudan can give oil. Somalia had nothing to give, so they wound up the mission. The Americans got nothing, so that's the closest mission. Sudan, Congo, the entire wealth of the world lies below these two countries. They'll never give up peacekeeping there. So that is the interest which is being converted artificially. And peacekeeping has no interest. So these are one or two things that I wanted to bring out. Yes, preventive deployment is the only answer, as General Nambiar rightly brought out. Why take the last bus home? Get there in time. And again, it'll come with the connotation of sovereignty if it is corrected. And one or two more words that I want to bring out. Yeah, that's all. I had about 10 points. But I noticed we'll move further. I'm still standing where I was 28 years ago in this hall.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I request you to write an article for you if I get Punish him for it. No, but enrich many more people, sir. You know, we are very limited number here. But these thoughts will get lost.
This is the first time we sent women to. No, women came with me to Somalia. How you send women freely? I had to beg. When I came from Maliki, I asked women, they said, sorry.
Yeah.
The government said the foreign.
Please rise.
Sorry. When I went there, they came and desperately need women, they sent me 11 of them. And that is the beginning of women coming.
Please. Yeah, thank you.
Good evening,
Yeah,
everyone.
please.
My name is Varshita. My question is to the ambassador. India's contribution to the peacekeeping, do you think should be leveraged for diplomatic gains at the United Nations?
This one. It's already working.
Can you hear me?
No. Speak up.
Leveraging contributions to peacekeeping, there are two views. One is the realist school of thought, which says yes, leveraging and all the numbers and statistics that will work in speakers. That should sort of count for getting something out of for India's interests out of peacekeeping. And then there's, of course, the non-realist thought, which says that India will contribute and keep contributing for global good, peacekeeping, and not help or not want to make anything. equipped for conflict. Now, I do think that when peacekeeping, when calls for troops come from the United Nations Security Council, there is a lot of discussion in the wide forum on why India should contribute troops, should not contribute troops for that call. But on the basis of what I've read and what I've experienced, my own experience is on South Sudan, Mali, Central African Republic. These were the ones that started when I was in New York. We went into South Sudan because we had invested in oil, and we had oil fields in South Sudan. And then our entire calculation got turned on its head because the civil war started in South Sudan. And as General Bitter said, nobody understood the politics of South Sudan, the tribal politics of South Sudan. So the consequence of our leveraging the troops, 25% of the troops were Indian when we started in 2011. The consequence is that all the Indian owned oil fields are still capped. They've been capped since December 2013. No oil has come out of them. So was it worth it? Was it leverage? I do not know, but I think that there are these things which, if you are to follow that line of a realist leveraging, then we have to have much more awareness of the ground realities. Now we have missions in all the African countries, so I assume we have more ground reality assessments coming from our people on the ground and not relying on either textbooks or developed country form of master work. I mean, that's the perspective. But the second thing is to also influence how our troops are going to be deployed. Even with contributing 25% of woundeds, we were never allowed to debate in the Security Council mandate discussions on where our troops should be. And in 2014, faced with this, when the civil war was in full, we had to take the step of organizing a briefing for the Security Council in our own vision, because they won't let us go into the council. And except for China, everybody has attended. So that will become the norm only when we are equal in terms of taking decisions. We will only be equal in terms of taking decisions if we have to veto power in the Security Council, or if none of the Security Council have.
Thank you. Please.
Insightful talks by everyone. I would like to address Mr. Mukherjee. In fact, one of your recommendations where you said that made in India equipment should be mostly wars, and which is happening in Sudan also. So actually, I'm technically a non-working member of LSI, a member, and right now with corporate. So we are the global leaders in manufacturing and mostly workers. We also on the website as LTG partners and stewardship. And the Ministry of External Affairs is already cooperating to give a presentation, and they are considering us as water diplomacy to global south countries. Rather than providing drinking water, they provide liquid machine at atmospheric water generators. Recently, the International Red Cross is also approved this, and it could be a wonderful technology for the troops of ours, of course, made in India. Our troops, peacekeeping troops venturing into dangerous areas just to source drinking water. We can have this machine with them. We can disaster management. Suppose the man-made disaster they were considering us. Of course, I mean, we couldn't send it differently because the environment didn't want it. They said, water purifiers हो जाएगा काम. So, मुझे लगता है And probably I'll write it before we make a vote on this. Probably you can consider it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comment. I just want to, we firstly very happy to see what equipment you're bringing. I also just want to raise the house that today Indian contingents are only using Indian Navy. All contingents are every aspect of our contingent is Vikings. So there is nothing that we are picking up from the minister. And I'll be very happy to report to you. Whatever deal ABCs we had in Congo, they were still functional after the 3-4 RPGs fired on them. And they were very robust and whatever water purification equipment you talk about, we have our indigenous fund, but we'll be happy to analyze what you watch. I will also take this little opportunity since I've got the mic to respond to Jalmada. Sir, we take all your points very respectfully. At no point of time are we differentiating between peacekeeping and peacekeeping. That is what we said. We totally understand. What we said was we wanted omnibus mandate. You can't have a differentiated mandate. And yes, when budgeting comes, we will look at peaceable operations, unpeaceable operations. Don't strictures of this cannot only on this cannot be spent on land. That it is broad-based. No, there is very silent. It has to become broad-based.
It's a never-ending debate.
And as far as this aspect of taking another nation before the destruction out of India, and the reason why we created that opportunity for them, when you have to collaborate and build capacity, then you have to be a leader in peacekeeping, and which we think we are today. There is no harm in taking somebody along and giving that capacity, and based on that capacity, they put an independent bank.
I'm not getting into what is the
Yes.
and political needs.
But this is what the underlying piece.
So, yes, we had a case in Cyprus where Czechoslovakia and some other countries, they wanted the others brought them in and they came out without asking the UN. So, and they had to get UN clearance. Similar countries are playing these games with each other.
Okay.
May I now request Mr. Chombi Shah, the UN resident coordinator in India, to give us a position.
Thank you. It's a very good taste.
General Satish Nambiar, a legend in the halls of UN peacekeeping and member of a legendary family in the halls of all UN. General Rakesh Kapoor, Ambassador Ashok Mukherjee, our hosts here today, General Sharma and Goswami and the colleagues of USI, to all of you here in the room, international community as well, and all elements of India's military and peacekeeping and academic and other faculties. It's a great honor and privilege to be here on behalf of the United Nations. आप सभी को UN परिवार की तरफ से Peacekeeping Divas की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं. As we have heard throughout these sessions, we stand at a very decisive moment in history. The world is off track in so many ways. 87% of the Sustainable Development Goals are off track. Conflicts abound. Climate crisis rages. And this year, 2025, is meant to be a year of milestones, a year of celebrations, in fact. Very importantly, 75 years of India's support and leadership in peacekeeping, UN peacekeeping, and in peace and security more broadly. It is, in fact, the 80th year of the United Nations itself, the very concept of countries coming together, collective solutions for common challenges, the 10th anniversary of the Sustainable Development Goals, putting numbers and targets, bringing together development and so many other elements in a broader sense. Unfortunately, it also is turning out to be another sort of unhappy milestone. We see for the first time power corners moving away from the collective, moving away from this sense of common solutions. And we have, dare I say it, we've seen that movie before. Where will this take us in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? So we need support to international peace and security now more than ever. And that's why it is so important we're having this conversation here today. The peacekeeping concept, as was mentioned, was something radically new. The very idea of having men and women in uniform there not to wage war, but to keep the peace. And today, across the world, approximately 70,000 people are engaged in that noble mission from 121 different countries. But they are facing more challenges than ever before. The number of conflicts and the typologies have essentially sort of doubled in the last 5 years. The percentage of children living in conflict zones has doubled as well. The weaponization of new unforeseen digital tools has increased. The physical and cyber attacks, the phygital, let's say, risk, lowered barriers to the use of other types of weapons, misinformation and disinformation, worlds around us complicating the challenging, already challenging tasks. And at the same time, just when United Nations peacekeepers need more resources, they are having to do the same work with less. The UN's peacekeeping budget in the last years from 2016 to 2024 fell by over $2 billion. If I'm not mistaken, that's something like a 25% drop in resources at a time when the challenges are increasing. And peacekeepers now are facing so many different types of risks, not just conventional forces, but terrorists, organized crime, and a proliferation of other non-state actors, and even state actors. My first experience engaging with peacekeeping, UN peacekeeping, was in Lebanon with UNIFIL. And in fact, I'm pleased to say that my very first experience was with INDBAT, overlooking Sheba Farms, where I was very impressed to see not only my first blue helmets, but also my first blue turbans, and enjoy some wonderful Indian meals. But the purpose of that engagement, I was with UN Development Program, was exactly aligned with what has been mentioned today, the importance of bringing together peace building and the development mandates as well, so that the communities are supported with positive opportunities, not just the negative associations with militaries. So I think that despite these minimal resources, our peacekeepers are bravely undertaking their missions where no one else would dare to go. As General Nambiar mentioned, India in particular has a record of serving in the most difficult places. This year's theme, The Future of Peacekeeping, has emphasized that in parallel processes, the Pact for the Future, adopted at the General Assembly, has reinforced the need to ensure a bright future for future generations on the basis of reforms and changes now. And reforms to peacekeeping, doing better with less, is very central to that, as is some of the more intractable challenges. Reform of the Security Council, as has been discussed today, absolutely vital. And I can say that one could not possibly argue there is any country with a stronger resume in a reformed UN Security Council than India in every dimension one can think of. The recent peacekeeping ministerial in Berlin also reinforced the collective view that we need many of the elements mentioned here today: strengthen local ownership, adaptability, flexibility, predictability in terms of financing, efficiency, and accountability. And the UN at 80 broader reforms, which were already planned. Already, the Secretary General has launched many reform initiatives to do better with less, has now been overtaken by events in recent months. And we are looking at very dramatic changes in the funding profile and in the structures of the United Nations across the board. And so here again, India's leadership is more vital than ever. India has stood so strong. India has been the largest contributor of men and women to peacekeeping operations since the beginning, as we have heard, nearly 300,000, if I'm not incorrect, over the years, and continues to be absolutely vital with some 6,000 peacekeepers deployed across 9 active missions. I do wish also to join in remembering, as we have done, the 182 fallen heroes, Indian peacekeepers who have given the ultimate sacrifice for peace, and the condolences and the great commitment, condolences to the families, to the government, to the people of India for those sacrifices, for the dedication and the bravery. And India's efforts are not only about scale, but also about transformation. We've heard here today how India has transformed, has brought UN Security Council Resolution 1325, Women in Peace and Security, to life through so many different ways. I won't elaborate those, but truly, truly inspirational. And not only trailblazing, but continuing to push the envelope in what is possible. I was very privileged to have the opportunity to sit down with Major Radhika Sen, who had received the medal from the Secretary General last year, and to really understand the power of having women in peacekeeping forces as well, for all of the different reasons that have been mentioned today, the female engagement teams. India's remarkable contributions can and will inspire all nations in implementation of the Pact for the Future. And finally, even as was just mentioned, Make in India has come into play now at a greater and greater scale. I've had the opportunity also to see all of the amazing armored personnel vehicles. Thankfully, didn't have to test the impact resilience. But I did get to drive one. I think it was a Bharat Forge. I do have an Indian driver's license. I brought it along, and have to say, truly, truly state of the art, the equipment that India is now providing even another dimension. So with that, dear colleagues, I will conclude and simply say that the world needs peace and security more than ever. The world needs India's leadership more than ever. India is a leader for the global South, but not only. India is uniquely positioned to bring the countries of the world together across divides, East and West, North and South, the club of those countries who land on the moon, and the G77, the club of developing countries. You name it, there isn't a dimension in which India isn't bringing very important leadership and very important relationship capital now at a time that we need it more than ever. The time is now. The place is here. आज के दिन हम भारत को दिल से धन्यवाद कहते हैं. धन्यवाद.
We had a very fascinating session to commemorate this 75th anniversary of India's participation in UN peacekeeping operations. I will not like to repeat what the very illustrious panelists here have stated, and I think that would be very much relevant to the present generation of peacekeepers and policy makers. But I just want to say a few words about USI's contribution to UN peacekeeping, because the very foundation of UN peacekeeping was laid by General Nambiar, who is amidst us, and USI did play a major role in propagating it further. But then there was a hiatus in between. We could not sort of cope up with it due to variety of factors. But I would be happy to state that in last 5 years, again, USI has come up in a very big way to promote this UN peacekeeping. I'll tell you that in last 5 years, we have 2 special publications of USI Journal. In addition, there are about 10 monographs we have taken on variety of issues. There are 4 books, 4 international seminars, and now we are running 2 courses. One very recently we did the Model UN for college students, and there is another course that we have curated together with UN headquarters and University of Costa Rica, that is on global leadership course, which we are now offering for certification globally in India and abroad. We also one of the 4 founding members of the Challenges Forum, and are also a member of Global Alliance for Peace Operations. So I can say with this kind of a repository on UN peacekeeping, today we are very well geared to collaborate with the Center for UN Peacekeeping. I had a discussion with the Deputy Chief, and I can assure you that it is CUNPK which will be in the vanguard. We can give you back-end support, but there is so much of knowledge here available and the expertise which you must use, because that kind of expertise, maybe the new generation of officers with the kind of routine that they have may not be able to sort of bring to bear. So please make use of us, and we are there at your beck and call, and hopefully we would create a new niche for India's contribution in the peacekeeping in terms of doctrinal thought, in terms of multi-domain expertise, and in way of creating new innovative ways of creating those skill sets which are required for, new generation peacekeeping operations. So with these words, I thank once again Jan Goswami for curating this event, and for General Nambiar, Ambassador Mukherjee, Jan Kapoor, General Leader, and Mr. Shombi Shop, who has always been very kind to be with us at a very short notice. With these words, thank you once again. Have a nice evening, and let's join us, please, for a cup of tea. Thank you very much.
To go, I got no.